You are listening to the one and only Visionaries Wrestling Network, envisioning excellence and providing your perfect podcast experience.
This is Banned from Ringside.
Tonight on the Banned from Ringside podcast, we go over the Money in the Bank pay-per-view. Sami Zayn vacates his title. We do week 4 of our NXT DoOver, and Becky's pregnant. That and a whole bunch more tonight on the Banned from Ringside podcast.
See, there you go. It's just like it's punting, man. You can't have the yips on this shit.
Ditch that 9 to 5. It's time to feel alive. Hello, Mark. So welcome to the Banned from Ringside podcast. As always, I'm your host, Bill Vagey, a.k.a. Handler Bing. And over there in Edwardsville, Illinois, we have Two Beers. Zach Pullman, what's going on, Two Beer?
Oh, not much, man. Beautiful day out here drinking a Hollow Point Slosh beer from my buddy's brewery in Nashville. If you're in the Nashville area, check them out. They're awesome. And for all you marks out there, I just want to quote my main man, Maury, you are not the father.
And over there in University City, St. Louis, Missouri, we have Jason Cornelius Bell. What's going on, JCB?
Allow us to bow our heads as I read from the Banned from Ringside podcast, volume 155, chapter 3, verse 14 of the Good Spark saith, hashtag boo the heels. It is all good, baby. Listen, share, subscribe, repeat. Shout out to my girl, Becky Balboa. I love you, babe. No shortage of shit to talk about this week. Bill getting in Twitter beefs. It's been a good week. I've been sitting back watching this shit unfold, just kind of enjoying this shit happening.
I don't get in Twitter beefs like you do. I mean, that I barely even did anything. But, you know,
what happens when you express your opinion and you retweet it on our Twitter page and then see what happens.
Well, I just retweet it because I don't have any followers, and our Twitter page does. So, I mean, that's my way of cheating. It's really not fair. Not a whole. I mean, we got tons of stuff to talk about this week, guys. How is how is year 3 of the quarantine going for you guys?
Year 3.
Everybody hanging in there?
Yeah.
Zach, you good?
I think I'm on my second tank of gas. Like, I'm good. Actually, the only big bummer for me is not being able to use all of the library services. Like, there's still cloud-based services and stuff that are great, but like I go to the library like a couple times a week, and that's been a thing. But like, I'm an introvert, man. Like, this is honestly great. I mean, aside from the people dying and being very out of work, I am making enough money to get by, and it's almost illegal to talk to me, and I love it.
You know, I was hoping that you were going to say great. The one thing that you miss is, you know, seeing your boys JCB and Bill Vagey for the podcast every week, but I guess not. Jason, how are you holding up?
Oh man, you know me. I'm just hanging in there, just watching the ridiculous amount of wrestling. I'm hanging in there, man. I can't speak for anybody else. Myself personally, yeah, I miss seeing you guys, but of course we have to err on the side of safety first and all that other good stuff. But all in all, like I said, myself personally, I can't complain.
All right,
now that we have this set up, like, you guys will be lucky to ever see me again.
You see, I'm never leaving this house.
Jason, before we get too far into it, why don't you let everybody know about F&B Eatery?
F&B Eatery on the corner of 3453 Southampton and Marquette. If you are in the mood for a smash burger, they are doing curbside. Call my boy Mike up. Slide in on Facebook, in his DMs on Facebook, DMs on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all B and F&B Eatery. Good Lord, I can't even talk too high. F&B Eatery on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. Check my boy out. Like I said, he's doing curbside. Eventually, I'm sure, like most people, are going to start opening up apparently on Monday here in various parts of St. Louis. So once again, like I said, this is the chance to follow his social media, follow him, see what he is doing, so that way you will not miss your chance to get a smash burger. Check my boy Mike out, F&B Eatery on the corner of 3453 Southampton. Tell him that Banned from Ringside sent you.
And without further ado, let's get to that. 3 counts.
1, 2, 3.
Jason, kick us off.
Well, since I'm looking at it, let's talk about it. Money in the Bank, Sunday night. Interesting ending to Money in the Bank, considering that they did both ladder matches simultaneously. I knew that that's what they were going to do coming in, but what they say and what they do obviously are always two different things. I'll just go with the biggest takeaway from Money in the Bank for me was the main event. Who won the main event, how they presented the main event. It was, to me, another quote-unquote cinematic match, so to speak. Asuka winning is, upon retrospect, not a surprise anymore. Obviously, we'll talk about that. I think, obviously, the biggest controversy, if you want to call it controversy, is Otis winning in a kind of I call it a major league kind of a move where if you've seen the movie Major League and Willie Mays Hayes comes up and Bob Uecker sets it up and you can tell how the season's going to go by the first batter of the season, and he oops it up the line and he beats it out. That's kind of what happened to Otis. Right place, right time. The briefcase falls in his lap and he wins. So obviously, where do we go from there? Rumor has it that it's going to be a tag team cash-in, which it is what it is. I'm not a huge fan of that. I think you could have did it another way. The match itself, I thought it was a little too over the top for me personally, especially when you can kind of start to see things coming. Dana Brooke, God bless her, she put her ass out there on multiple occasions with the headshot, slipping on the wet floor. Asuka not being touched, winning the Money in the Bank briefcase kind of sits with me wrong. It kind of takes away from the gimmick itself. I mean, it's supposed to be hard. The risk is worth the reward. She didn't even get touched. So, ultimately, I mean, at the end of the day, it was what it was. A lot of it was pretty much predictable. I thought Seth and Drew was the match of the night. But for me, I'm getting to the point where now I'm worried about them doing cinematic matches too much, even in a scenario where there are no fans. I think if you present good storylines and good angles and then bring back behind it a good match, fans are going to be there when it's time for them to come back. This, to me, was a bridge to go in other places, which I have no idea where they're going at this point. A part of me doesn't even care. But that's, for me, my biggest takeaway from it was Otis surprisingly winning the Money in the Bank, and Asuka, not so surprising upon retrospect, winning the Women's Money in the Bank.
Zach, what you think?
My favorite part about it was how short it was. It was like 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
And, oh, my God, that was refreshing. It was so refreshing. It was like a WWE in your house, but back then you had to pay like $35, which is like $170, like due to inflation now, like something crazy. But it was really refreshing because, I mean, like these things can be laborious, and I'm barely watching wrestling anymore. I'm like the opposite tack of Jason. Like I cancel my New Japan because there's no new content, and I'll get back right on it, as soon as there is. And I watch on Wednesday nights. And it was almost like too much for me to watch on Sunday. That's me personally, and just a general commentary on my malaise due to this, pandemic and the situation. But the length was short. Some of the matches were just atrocious. But like I said, Drew and Seth was good. It was a good match for what it was. In an empty arena crowd. The Money in the Bank was not as offensive to me as it was to some people. I enjoyed most of the sight gags. Some of them were big misses, like the Doink and the Brother Love. Those are big misses for me. But I legitimately laughed out loud during the food fight when Heyman got smashed with the tray full of food. Like there was an actual like laugh out loud moment for me. Just his face. He's just so good. His reaction was so good. And the outcomes were fine. I was fine with the cinematic aspect. The outcomes for me were totally I'm down with them. Like especially in retrospect with Asuka, like Jason said, I'm a big Otis supporter. I actually said a few months ago, if anybody wants to dig into the archives, put the belt on this guy because I know Bill and among other people, not to steal Bill's thunder, but Bill was not into the finish. Partly, I think, because it was a comedy. He's a comedy act currently, but I think Otis has potential to be big baby face. He's a total shooter. This guy was a state wrestling champion, like total shooter. Like he's got that. He's just like an 80s pro wrestler, and I love it. And it's like a throwback. So even if they don't do for the tag titles, like I could see like Otis being like not big money because nobody's drawing big money, but I think Otis could carry that load, and I think he'd do a lot better than a lot of people think. So I think it was kind of a waste of a Money in the Bank. They're just doing Money in the Bank because that's the time of year that you do Money in the Bank, and it was kind of interesting the way that they went about it. But the gimmick itself seems to have lost its luster. We usually love this match because it's like a really good ladder match, and then we have like this year-long gimmick, and it seems the last couple of years they're ruining the gimmick. Like, why even have the gimmick if like you're not gonna have the suspense? Like WWE already feels like we already know what's going to happen. Like you tune into a show and you're pre-programmed and you just kind of know, you don't necessarily know who's going to win and who's going to lose, but you know that you're not going to be like surprised by anything. Like AEW kind of has a sense of danger about it, right? Where like you really don't know what's going to happen because they're new and they're fresh and they have new ideas. But WWE, you just kind of, you know what to expect going in, but Money in the Bank season, you don't, because anything could happen. And it's just like, they're taking that away from us. So anyway, I'll stop, going off about that. But yeah, Bill, what'd you think?
I'll start off with the good. So,
Look at you.
The good is I was watching this with Steve, with my brother-in-law Steve, over at Steve's place, and, we had been having a good time that afternoon, and he wasn't enjoying it in the moment, intoxicated. I was defending it. I was like, you know what? This is fun. They're just trying to have fun, and they're doing the best with what they can do. I mean, I'm on the record as saying that I would have preferred them just to have the standard ladder match, but I don't mind them going outside the box and trying new things in this unprecedented time. 2, I like Asuka winning. Obviously, Asuka's a huge talent, and I know that they taped these a few weeks ago, and they might have had the belt hanging over the ladder had they taped it live on last Sunday, but they didn't, so that's fine. I'm totally cool with Asuka winning. 3, I like that they're pushing young guys, are pushing new guys. I like that there's new talent. That's not the talent I would have chosen. I would have chosen Aleister Black, but I do like that. 4, Drew McIntyre versus Seth Rollins was a legit great match. I know it was in front of nobody, but man, it was a fun match. It was a good match, and the right guy went over. That being said, my biggest problem with Otis winning, and trust me, I got real down on it that night. I mean, it really capped off when I was having fun watching it. It pissed me off because I don't want comedy at the top of the card. I said this on Twitter, and I've said it. I mean, I've never had to say this on this podcast because they've never put comedy at the top of the card. Otis is a straight-up comedy act as he stands right now. Yes, I know he was a collegiate wrestler. Yes, I know he's got wrestling charisma, no doubt. The worm is stupid. It's not a main event level gimmick. I mean, Scotty 2 Hotty never had a chance at the belt because it's stupid. Because it's comedy. It's there for the kids. It's there for the, it's just not. It's not the wrestling that you want at the top of the card. And I don't think that there's a whole lot of people out there, including WWE marks out there, who would disagree with that. There's a certain time and a place. Santino Marella never won Money in the Bank. This is the equivalent of giving to Santino Marella. Santino Marella was also a shoot fighter. Santino Marella was also a very talented, charismatic dude. But he was a comedy act, which is what Otis is. So if they would have serioused him up a little bit going into it and made them see, plus the way he won it was, and the face he made when he won it did not give me hope that he wasn't going to be a comedy act going forward. Lost my train of thought, but I mean that's why I'm ultimately against. It's not that Otis probably can't go and isn't talented and shouldn't get a shot, shouldn't get a push, because the people love him and he's over. It's just that I have a problem with comedy at the top of the card. And enough so to where, like I said on Twitter, this is almost as bad as Brock Lesnar winning it. It's not quite as bad as Brock Lesnar winning it. That was terrible. But, I remember what I was going to say. If he uses the Money in the Bank to challenge for the tag titles, then this makes something that I was against even worse. Because as Zach said, over the past few years, the Money in the Bank, which used to be a fun gimmick that guys used to hold on to that briefcase for 9 months, they'd carry it in the WrestleMania season. To have it so now both Money in the Bank contracts are completely out of the storyline if they challenge for the tag titles, that will actually, I won't get too upset because I only think about this shit like twice a week, but it's like that will it's so stupid. It would be so stupid. That would really make a bad situation worse in my mind. I'll throw it over to you, Jason.
I'll just say this: if this was a situation where let's just play devil's advocate, because that's what we do around these parts. Let's just say
that's what you do.
This is what you do. If this was a scenario where the tag team division had a legitimate tag teams and there was a investment in the division itself, I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with this. This just feels like, okay, we don't have an idea of what to do because now two of our biggest stars are basically off TV. One's not coming back for 9 months plus, at least a year, and the other is indefinitely not coming back anytime soon. This just feels like, okay, what do we do? What's the best way we can weasel our way? I shouldn't even say weasel our way out of this, but what's the best way we can book our way out of this predicament? Because Becky ain't coming back and Roman ain't coming back anytime soon. Like, I agree with Bill on this. Aleister Black makes sense to me because that, to me, is kind of the Money in the Bank gimmick itself. It's supposed to elevate somebody that's in the mid-card to the upper card, dare I say, to the title picture.
It serves the same purpose.
Okay, Jason, this is what we're supposed to be doing with Otis. But this is what, once again, I agree with Bill.
Ooh, I like this.
If you presented Otis a different way, then I would be more inclined to think, okay, this can get it done. But as it stands, let's just say Otis is the champ right now. You can't have him on the Today Show looking like that. No disrespect. You can't have him going around doing the rounds of media looking that way. He isn't a world champion in that scenario. Yes, he is over, but can he draw mainstream fans over to the WWE and make it work? Answer, no.
Jason, do you know that you just said once again, I agree with Bill? I'm going to grab that. I'm going to make it a drop. And next time you're not on the show, I'm just going to play it the entire time after everything I say. Zach, as a guy who has expressed his support for Otis in the past, what do you have to say about what Jason and I had to say about putting comedy at the top of the card?
Yeah, I mean, considering the current situation, everything's a little bit different, but let's just pretend that things are totally normal. I totally understand that. Like, a pure comedy act at the top, it doesn't seem right unless that comedy act is drawing money and is super over. But you don't want your world champion to seem like a fluke, right? Because you don't want to devalue the belt any more than the promotion already has. So I totally get that. I just think that Otis could quickly, do kind of like how we talk about Orange Cassidy, right? Like, he's a total gimmick, but underneath that gimmick is a serious performer. And I think everybody realizes that. And I think there's some unrealized potential with Otis where he could get serious, right? Like, he could lock it down and use that, momentum that he has from being a gimmick to turn himself into a serious competitor. I just think that that's a possibility, and I would like to, reserve judgment until I see like what actually happens. But I agree with you guys as far as like comedy at the top of the card, and I think the Santino Morello thing was an apt analogy. It was a good one.
I remember.
Can I say something real quick?
Sure.
Is this okay? So this sounds like the argument for or against Kofi Kingston. Kofi Kingston was considered that comedy act until Kofi Mania took over. I guess that's where I'm going with this with Otis. I need to see that moment where, okay, I need to take him a little more seriously versus him feuding with Dolph Ziggler, courting Mandy Rose, and having the Money in the Bank briefcase fall into his lap.
Right.
Now,
It's also really hard right now because there's no fans. So like, who's to say whether someone's like over?
Okay, exactly.
The metrics are all they're all wonky, you know.
Right, and that's another big issue where things are being tried and there's not a litmus test to see if it's over or it's not. It'd have been interesting to see how it would have been received by a live crowd if that's the way they went and Otis won. I'd have loved to hear the reaction for that. They might not even went with a cinematic match, but that, you know, if and buts were candy and nuts. I mean, we can talk about that all day long.
Oh, I think it would have popped the crowd, Otis winning.
Okay. I'm thinking it's like 70-30. There would have been some people that had your reaction. What the fuck? So I guess it's just ultimately at the end of the day, the crowd is being missed. That's why I think they're allowing themselves to take chances. But more so for me, this feels like the Kofi Kingston argument where Kofi wasn't being really taken seriously until you put Daniel Bryan in front of him. They had that angle that led to the WrestleMania match. History's made. I need to see that before I can be like, okay, Otis could be a legit champion.
I mean,
anybody could be Drew. Anybody could be fucking Jinder Mahal.
I'll push back on that a little bit though, because Kofi. It only seems like Kofi, even though New Day can be funny, it only seems like management, creative, wasn't taking Kofi seriously. Kofi was loved by the fans, and he was kind of seen as a guy who didn't really get the chance or the push that he ever really deserved at the top of the card. So it's a little different. I agree with Zach, who agreed with me about my Santino comparison.
You ain't shit.
Zach, what did you think about Braun Strowman and Bray?
Oh God, I forgot about that. I just blocked it out.
I think that's really all you need to say there.
Yeah, they're making it really hard to be a Bray Wyatt fan. You know, like I really appreciate what he does creatively, but every time they put him in the ring, I don't even know if I can put it all on him or the booking. Some of it's got to go on him, but his matches are not good, guys.
No,
they're not.
He also, as in kayfabe style, he also got outsmarted by Braun Strowman.
Right.
Which, I mean, geez.
That to me is, I mean, it's steal your thunder, but that to me is more of the bigger issue than anything else. Like I said last week, I think this is the reason why they're trying to separate Bray Wyatt from The Fiend. And then obviously at the end of the match, you see, you know, The Fiend getting ready to, you know, make his first debut into this feud. But for Bray Wyatt to be outsmarted by Braun Strowman was my takeaway from that. That's not a good look. That, to me, hurts the Bray Wyatt character a little more than the actual loss itself. I expected Bray to lose, but to get outsmarted and then lose, there is the rub.
All right, I think that'll be enough of that. Unless you guys have any other thoughts.
I think we talked about as long as the pay-per-view went.
Yeah, let's get to our 2 count.
1, 2, 3.
2 beer, give us the 2 count.
Becky's got a baby in her belly. Seth Rollins put it there with his penis.
I mean, that's kind of an assumption.
At least, I don't know, maybe Seth's celibate now because this whole Messiah gig. I mean, like,
oh, shit.
Maybe it was somebody else, but no, like in all seriousness, Becky said that, I think she had an interview, and it was a couple months ago, she realized that Seth Rollins was who she wanted to have kids with, and she didn't know if she was ever going to have kids, because, I mean, like, she looks good, man, but, like, Becky's no spring chicken, you know, like, that maternal clock's ticking, you know, it's just, like, it's a thing, like, you know, women get older, and it gets harder, and there's complications and stuff, and especially when you're a high performer, like a high dollar performer. She's the number one person on WWE, man or woman. She is WWE, the face.
Not the kind of high performer that Jason is, right?
No, as in getting high and performing.
I wouldn't suggest that for anybody, but go ahead.
No, so, I mean, this was a definite kind of a surprise, because she's on top. And it's not like Ronda, where Ronda was in for a year and out, and she always just, you know, planned on doing this for a year because she loved wrestling and just wanted to see how it went. Becky, this has been majority of her life has been in preparation for this, and she made it, man. She fought her way, like, all the way to the top against like, you know, Vince didn't want her because of her accent, and then Conor McGregor happened, and I mean, changed his outlook on that, and thankfully for him and for her and for everybody, because she really is a fantastic performer. Like, maybe not the best worker, like, she's good, she's really good, but she is a star. And anyway, so she's gone. So not only, like as Jason said, not only do we lack Roman Reigns, who, for better or worse, is their guy, right? That's the one that they always lean on. They don't have Becky either, and you know, the ratings are below 2 million on Raw, and that's not a 2.0, guys. We're below 2 million a week, and Vince's world is crumbling down around him. So he could not have loved this, no matter like what face he's put on it. He could not have loved that this happened. He probably offered her $750 to just get it done. But,
See, oh, you are going to hell. Oh my
Cold-blooded.
God, you're going to hell. Oh, I can't believe you just said that.
I mean, if he was the president, he would offer her $15,000. But
Jesus Christ.
Cold-blooded.
Fucking believable. You just said
that. I mean,
bye, Becky. She's totally a MILF now, and good for her.
Jason, what do you think about Asuka being the new Raw champion?
Well, if it wasn't going to be Shayna, this makes the most sense, like I said, upon retrospect, because Asuka has kind of been taking over the slack, for lack of a better term. Becky has kind of slid into the background, so to speak, doing some Hollywood acting and all that other good stuff, which fueled that speculation that maybe she was going to go the role of The Rock and go into the Hollywood way. Asuka, like I said, has stepped up. I mean, I might not necessarily like the dancing Asuka gimmick, but it's gotten her over again to where now they feel comfortable enough putting the title on her. Dare I say, that promo kind of made Asuka a babyface all of a sudden. So, I mean...
That was my next question for you. Was that a babyface turn for Asuka? Because as you can see on Friends of BFR on Facebook, our co-host, Murray the Murray Man, Lucha Chris, posted a quote that's allegedly from CM Punk saying they missed a big chance to have Asuka spit the green mist in her eye as she was pregnant. Now, did they miss that opportunity?
I spit the green mist in her eye.
Jesus Christ. If I have to think about it really quick, it feels like you have more heel women on the Raw roster than face women, so they probably just took Becky out, put Asuka in at the top of the card, and as the number one babyface. You got Nia Jax, you got Shayna Baszler. Asuka would have been the third heel, not necessarily in that order. So, yeah, that's probably the way they're thinking about it. Just replace it out. Asuka is over. I mean, this version of Asuka is over. Because, like I said, it might not be for me, but this version of Asuka is over. You place her with the title, and now you got immediate Nia Jax, Shayna Baszler matchups off the jump. You can go from there.
That promo by Shayna Baszler later on Raw, where she was criticizing Becky for giving up the belt just so Becky could have just to house a miserable parasite. Now, Zach, you have children. Jason does too, but he doesn't see or talk to them. Zach, have you ever thought about your children? Have you ever thought about your children or called them miserable parasites?
Nah, I've thought about that about other people's kids, though, so I get it.
But I don't know what the reaction to that promo. I was asleep by the time Shayna cut that promo, and I watched it later on in the week. I don't know what the reaction to that promo was on Twitter, but I'm pretty impressed that they wrote Shayna to stay in character for that and to be, as Jason would say, cold-blooded as she was. That and she also went after Natalya later about saying that Natalya
she said something like she'd never have kids.
Yeah, I know. It was pretty rough, man. And then she went out and
fertility joke. Like,
I think it was a fertility joke.
God, that's no girl, in my opinion.
This is where the Howard dynasty will end with Natalya. Basically, I'll just paraphrase it. I was like, oh, goddamn, that's how we do things.
And then she squashed her.
Right.
So, we don't have to belabor the point too much. Asuka's the new champion. Congratulations to Becky and Seth. And that's enough. Let's get to the 3 counts. Okay, so Sami Zayn, who was the current Intercontinental Champion, has vacated the belt. And he has vacated the belt because WWE told their performers that they didn't have to come to tapings if they didn't want to, if they worried about their safety or their health or the health of those around them. Sami decided not to come to the tapings, and WWE in turn vacated his belt. I haven't read as much about this online as I'm guessing at least Jason has. Jason, what's the lowdown on this? This is not a shoot, right? Or this is not a work, right?
From all intents and purposes, what I think I can tell is this is the real deal, Holyfield. This is a shoot. WWE obviously has said that their performers don't have to come back if they don't feel safe to come back, see Roman Reigns. So for me, this is the same lines. Sami Zayn has these same issues. It's not an issue of a visa where he can't get back to the country. He doesn't feel safe. I can understand that. The press that came out was WWE stripped Sami Zayn of the title. And I think that's where kind of the verbiage gets into play, where Sami, under good faith, I think, came to them and said, hey, you know what? I don't feel comfortable about this. I can't come back to wrestle, which is fine. Like I said, I get that. It feels like WWE in some kind of way has turned this around and made, whether it's work or shoot at this point, they've made Sami look like the bad guy. Like they stripped him of the title because it sounds worse. It's to me, it just sounds worse than just Sami saying, okay, you know what? I don't feel comfortable. I'm giving the title up. If you're getting stripped of the title, that means, at least in my mind, you've done something wrong to where now we have to take the title away from you. For me, like I said, ultimately, at the end of the day, this is a shoot. This is real deal shit. But I think WWE has kind of put a spin on it to where it now makes Sami look like the bad guy versus WWE looking like the bad guy.
All right. So at the risk of stealing Zach's thunder, I'm going to say that WWE continues to just take the wrong path when it comes to PR. In the face of a global pandemic, if somebody is worried, it's unclear how this became a political issue, but there are those people that don't feel like wearing masks and shit like that, and I just wanted to go on the record and say that I do wear a mask when I go out, and I think that you people should too. What do you mean, you people? But I do want to say though that in the face of this global pandemic, asking these guys to wrestle is kind of going above and beyond anyway. And if one of them might be asking too much anyway, and if one of them, who might be a title holder like Sami Zayn, decides not to come, I think stripping him of the belt is pretty shitty. What do you, Zach, did I steal your thunder, or are you going to zag when I think you're going to zig and come out pro Vince just like you always do?
Oh, yeah, that's me, baby. No. I mean, all we have to do is, you can compare this to the other wrestling promotion that's running, which is AEW, which, should they be running? That's also questionable. I've definitely brought that up before. Like, it's not like they have carte blanche and, like, they have, like, zero responsibility. Like, them running is also, like, somewhat irresponsible. Whatever their justification is for it, right? Like, putting smiles on people's faces or, whatever WWE says. But at least in that company, look who's not there. Young Bucks, like Adam Page, like these guys, like there's a bunch of people that are not there and they're not losing their position. They aren't stripping Adam Page of the tag team titles. They aren't making Kenny Omega find another tag team partner, even though he is tagging with other people. It's not like, it's not like the titles are so important that they have to be defended right then at that moment. And I don't mean the titles are so important. It's just like there's other things going on. The Intercontinental Championship has not been important for a very long time, and whether it's on TV or not is of no consequence. There are literally dozens of titles on WWE TV. We don't need the Intercontinental Championship for a month. Like, it's just not a thing. Again, it's bad PR. I think a lot of it has to do with Vince and company not liking Sami's politics. Sami's an outspoken progressive. And they have him as a heel because he's a great talker and he can be annoying, but like they've really missed the boat. Like Sami Zayn, especially watching our Revolution takeover, could be the biggest babyface in the entire company if you just let him be Sami Zayn. Let him be the unsung hero of our generation. Of like they did this with Daniel Bryan, who leans progressive, and they made him a heel out of it because Vince thinks that saving the planet is the dumbest thing ever. Like, it's just obnoxious. Like, let the man be the man. Like, he could be adored by so many people, and they just missed the boat with him literally since he's come from NXT. When he's not feuding with Kevin Owens, he's not doing anything of consequence, including this Intercontinental title run. It's not of consequence, and it's not his fault because we know how great Sami Zayn is, and he's just another victim of the WWE machine.
Yeah, it's a real shame. I'm not sure what else there is to talk about this other than Vince just does not have his finger on the pulse of...
No, I'll say it. I'll say it. Fuck it. And it's not going to be anything like this is a hot take. This is something that
don't say anything you're going to regret, Jason. Don't say it.
Yeah,
we're live on the air. We're live to tape.
I'll say too late for that shit. This is what happens when you put all eggs in one person's basket. This is what happens when you have a thin roster. God forbid Becky gets pregnant. God forbid Roman Reigns doesn't feel safe to come back to work. Now what? You don't give any of these other guys an opportunity to get over. And this is why I'll go back to Otis so I can still people here saying people go, what about Otis? I already talked about Otis, okay? So let's get off of Otis for a second. He could be a great mid-card guy. And then in case of emergency, such as this, then you can move him up because you've already established him as a solid mid-card guy versus pie in the sky. What's this? The Money in the Bank briefcase falls into my lap and everything is supposed to work out. If you build the roster up, not saying AEW, but if you just built the roster up to where other guys Shinsuke Nakamura's not doing anything. You know what I'm saying? Cesaro's not doing anything.
Rusev's not doing. Oh wait, never mind.
Okay. These guys aren't doing anything, and you could have had this already kind of built up to where a tournament would have been exciting. God forbid if you did have to take the title off Sami Zayn, it'd have been exciting to have a tournament for the title, because now you got like 3 or 4 guys that legitimately have been stopped short for whatever reason, and you could have made it out of that. Now it's just like, okay, let's get 8 guys together. We'll figure out who the Intercontinental Champion is at some point. And that's what it feels like.
Or
they don't give a shit about anybody else that's not a top star.
Or you could have done this. Now, hear me out. This might sound crazy. You have an 8-man tournament to see who's going to face Sami Zayn, and then give Sami Zayn a month to stay at home, maybe get tested, and then have the match against Sami Zayn. I know they don't want to have matches of consequence on television. I know they're totally against that. But an 8-man tournament to see who the number 1 contender is, that would give people a reason to watch. That's just me. A couple more things piggybacking off of.
Would that take you all the 20 seconds?
I
did
just
it for free.
Let me book the territory. Just let me book the territory.
They can book the territories.
Hey Zach, I didn't even think of that until right now. A couple other things, going back to what Jason just said and what Zach just said. Going back to what Zach just said first. I know who is willing to be there is Austin Theory, Angel Garza, and Andrade and Zelina Vega, because those motherfuckers take up an hour and a half of Raw every single week now. And going back to Jason's point about being too top-heavy at the card, those motherfuckers take up an hour every week just to make Drew McIntyre look good, because they have jobbed all those guys out to Drew maybe not all of them. Maybe Theory's never fought him. But they've jobbed Andrade out to McIntyre 3 times now. And
dude, this roster is more top-heavy than Dana Brooke. It's outrageous.
I don't know. She's got an ass, too. I mean, let's not. Let's not.
You better watch what you say around your boss, boy.
Come on, man. I'm just saying that you have all these talented guys, and we always used to say all roads lead to Roman, right? Well, now they're using an entire stable that they just put together of talented guys with a talented manager, and the only reason they're on television is to eat shit from Drew McIntyre. Anybody they beat, which is basically just fucking Tozawa and, whoever the fuck Austin Theory beats last week. I'm not going to go back and look it up. You guys can Google it if you want to know. What I'm saying is they're only there just to eat shit from Drew McIntyre, and that's not the way to do stuff. All right, I'll take from.
At some point, you got to get some guys over. I mean, it just. Andrade looks like a weak champion at this point. Because, I mean, he's been getting worked over by Drew McIntyre, and by hierarchy standards, I get it. The champion, the top guy, should be beating the mid-card champion. I get it.
I'll tell you
Once, okay. But 3 times? Stop.
I'll tell you what, just as a quick aside, because I don't know if we're going to get to it, and I thought about this while I was watching NXT last night. Because I watched AEW today, I watched NXT last night. NXT, and I know Zach wasn't a big fan of NXT, and it wasn't the most compelling episode, but they did something that kind of struck me. So, Imperium beat Riddle and Thatcher to win the tag belts. Very cool. You put Imperium over, right? Tegan Knox.
Should have been done a long time ago.
Fair enough. And Riddle and Thatcher then have a little bit of a beef afterwards. Tegan Knox fights Indy Hartwell. Tegan Knox, it's a nice showcase for her, but Indy Hartwell looked pretty good. Both of them kind of get over. Tony Nese and Jake Atlas, the finish was a little wonky. Jake Atlas, it was kind of heelish. So if you have Jake Atlas win, but he wins in the heelish way, both guys kind of get over, right? They do a great cross vignette. Cross is getting over there. Dakota Kai and Raquel Gonzalez vignette. It looked good, right? Then you have Finn Balor versus Cameron Grimes. Damian Priest interferes, so Grimes gets the victory over Finn Balor. Finn Balor doesn't lose anything because it was an interference, and Damian Priest is now going up against Finn Balor. Everybody gets over. Gallagher beats Swerve, heelish, but it makes Gallagher look good because he gets a win. It makes Swerve doesn't lose anything because he lost in a shady way. And then you have Thatcher and Riddle in an extremely physical match as the main event, and Thatcher loses because his shoulders were down in a submission attempt, and he forgot his shoulders were down, and then they kept fighting afterwards. Both those guys get over. Now, that is booking. You know, none of those ways that...
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
I was just agreeing with you. I didn't have any problems with the booking of the show. I thought it was totally solid, like you said. There wasn't a whole lot of consequence this week. It felt like overall between the two shows it was just very low stakes.
Right. And I won't disagree with that. But my point is that none of the wrestlers really looked bad, even in losses. And there
were no dumb babyface moments, because a lot of times WWE does the thing where the babyface gets distracted because they're a dumbass. Mm-hmm. Like they pay attention to the person at ringside instead of paying attention to their opponent.
Yes.
Or something stupid, and then the babyface looks like an idiot and they lose.
Right.
And that's a very common trope, but they didn't do that last night. It was good.
Lots of guys got over that. I'm just saying Raw doesn't do anything like that. Raw takes three of their most young, talented, fresh faces in Zelina Vega's faction and makes them all look bad by losing all the time.
And they give them 3 weeks. I mean, look at Cedric Alexander and Ricochet fighting in a 6-man tag this week, like doing nothing. Like they got 3 weeks of losing, and then they didn't get over. And Vince, gave up on him. It's like, oh, I beat you for 3 weeks and you can't get over? Like, what's the deal? You no talent hack?
Right. Can't get over in front of no crowd? I didn't hear any pops.
How dare you?
All right. I'm sick of talking about this. Let's talk about some good wrestling. And that's going to do it for our 3 counts.
1, 2, 3.
All right. So in our ongoing series, which has been a personal highlight for me every week, I must say, we are going to our 4th NXT DoOver, where we're rewatching all the TakeOver pay-per-views in order, trying to determine what is the best TakeOver of all time. This week we have NXT TakeOver Revolution. It's stylized our Evolution, which whatever. But, I don't really get it. This took place on December 11th. This took place on December 11th, 2014. And, guys, wouldn't you know it, I think this is the best one yet. And I'll also say that I think this was the event that takeovers turned into what they've become. What are your thoughts, Jason?
I will agree with what you said earlier, saying that this is probably the best of the bunch, but I will say, without spoiling it, that looking at this particular one the second time around, it reminds me that you can't turn your eyes away when you think it's over, because it's not over.
Well, you can go ahead and spoil it. It's 6 years old.
No, I mean, look, obviously, but this was where the main event, Kevin Owens comes out after Sami Zayn wins an amazing career versus title match versus Adrian Neville.
I'm watching it for the second time today right now.
And
it's pretty great.
After everybody comes in, it's a big hoopla. They make the title feel important, which I'm always a big proponent of doing so. They carry Sami Zayn around and the ring clears out. Kevin Owens comes in, they hug it out, and then they get outside the ring. Kevin Owens attacks him on the ramp, and this is after you see the NXT caption, in the lower left-hand side of the screen, basically meaning that the show is over. Okay, so, it's time to go to the bathroom and do whatever it is you need to do. And then the next thing you know, Kevin Owens attacks. So I know
on the night of his
we
debut.
always kind of right. Okay, on top of it. So, I mean, on top of his debut, he broke his nose, and then he starts the beginning and the end. He's the bookend in the show. I know we always talk about Gargano and Ciampa being that moment. I forget that this was like the original moment where you're not supposed to look away from NXT TakeOver, because when you think it's over, it might not be over.
Well, this is before NXT TakeOver was considered the event that we now consider it to be. I watched this. I remember watching this. I did not remember that much time had elapsed from the 3 count at the end of the 3 count.
1, 2, 3.
At the end of the main event to Kevin Owens turning on Sami Zayn. It's like a full 12, 15 minutes. Zach, what's your biggest takeaway from rewatching this, or maybe watching it for the first time, I guess?
Yeah, that was the first time for me. I had actually watched the main event before, just because I had heard that it was a really good match. And whenever we had that original Ciampa Gargano turn, I saw people on the internet comparing it to Sami and KO. So I went back and watched that. Totally apt comparison. But I had not seen any of the rest of the show. So, but yeah, I think you're right. This really kind of, to me, it is not quite TakeOver yet. But this is like the beginning of TakeOver, right? Like, we had a stellar match and the best match that we've had so far since we've been doing this, and also the best show overall. We had new faces that are not necessarily new faces, like indie darlings showing up in a big way, especially Kevin Owens. And I mean, I had not watched Kevin Owens' entrance. I had just watched that one match, like I said. So this is the first time me seeing Kevin Owens like show up in NXT. And dude, I got emotional. Like, I'm getting goosebumps just talking about it. Like, that was emotional stuff. Like, you could see that, he had probably been told his whole life that he was not the type of dude that WWE wanted. And eventually he's still like, he's not like Vince's type, but Vince, I mean, like, this is the same dude that Vince let hardway him, like, in the ring, like, last year or whatever. There's a level of respect there. And it was just super cool to see that. And, we had some other good matches and stuff, but yeah, this was cool. This whole like journey that we're doing, like condensing it like weekly, and we're getting like quarterly shows weekly, has been really fun, and I think it's just going to get better.
Yeah, it's funny that you bring up KO's entrance. Obviously, it's well documented. I'm a KO mark, out of this world mark. I love him. He's probably one of my top 4 wrestlers of all time. He's certainly my favorite one going right now. His entrance not only was an emotional, it had to be emotional for him, but as Kevin Steen on the Indies, the chant was always fight Steen, fight Steen, fight. And when he makes his debut as Kevin Owens, the crowd immediately starts saying, fight Owens, fight Owens, fight. And, I mean, come on, man. He just looks so badass. I mean, he's ready to fight. Juice Robinson, a.k.a. CJ Parker, made him look incredible. Really put him over.
Total job guy. Like, Juice is such a job guy in NXT.
It's hard to watch, man.
I know. And he even
said, it pisses me off.
Oh, they just totally missed the boat. I mean, how many other guys did they miss the boat with? How many guys just never did anything else because they missed the boat in WWE?
We get ready to go down to a nice little list of whatever happened to fill in the blank.
So, KO versus Juice. I didn't even write CJ Parker. I'm not going to do that to him. He's Juice Robinson. Would you care to give it a rating? I mean, Jason, I don't know if you listened to the podcast last week, Zach. I'm kind of like, I don't think that we have to give star ratings to 3 and 4 and 5 minute matches. I don't think there's going to be that many 3 and 4 and 5 minute matches going forward. I think pretty sure that it only happens at the beginning of the TakeOver event. I mean, but I'll give the KO debut match 5 stars.
Of course.
Jason, go ahead.
No, it's. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's. I agree with everything you said, especially about the crowd immediately going to fight Owens fight instead of fight Steen fight. This is why I think NXT is a particular, I won't say niche kind of promotion, but it caters to a particular type of wrestling fan base. These are the guys that are, really watch the indies and know who Kevin Steen is. So immediately they can change the chant. Ultimately, if this was a squash, let's just call it for what it was. I gave it 2 stars to be nice. It probably was really a 1-star match, but the fact that Kevin Owens came out and looked like he was legitimately taken by the moment, I gave it a 2nd star. But really, like I said, this was nothing but an introduction to Kevin Owens to those who didn't know, and then later on, obviously, who Kevin Owens is by the end.
Man, also, that's another reason why I say this felt like the beginning of what TakeOver became, because this crowd was, I mean, as great as the other crowds were, this crowd was crazy. This crowd was off the chain crazy. KO versus CJ Parker. Where do you give it, ZJ Pullman?
I actually didn't give it a star rating at all for that reason. I was just like, not that I think there are some shorter matches that are deserving of star ratings, but I mean, squashes are just squashes. They just are what they are. So yeah, I didn't do it. I will second that. This crowd was bonkers, and I think it was the next match, or maybe it was the Baron Corbin match when I was like, good God, this crowd is just out of control. Like, this is a TakeOver crowd.
All right, so I'm going to put Zach down for a 4 for the KO debut, 4 stars. Okay, Zach, I'll let you go first. The next match was Lucha Dragons versus the Vaudevillians, Aiden English, and friend of the show, Simon Gotch. Did you give a star rating to this one? This was only about 6 minutes long.
I did give this a star rating because it was like an actual, like, fortunately, it was just a 2.5. It was a match. These guys had a match. It was nice to see Simon Gotch. I hadn't seen him in a while. I haven't been watching MLW, but yeah, Simon Gotch was super cool. Whenever we met him at the original Starcast, and I had not seen Aiden English in action for a long time. But I mean, nothing to really take away here, guys. This was a TV match, right? This was not like the soon-to-be tag team classics that we will be seeing as we continue this journey. This was a match, and that's all it was. So I gave it 2.5 because.
So you're giving it so you give TV matches 2.5? I just want to be clear where we're at here.
I'm not saying I give TV matches 2.5, but I mean, the work rate was decent. Sometimes the luchas can get a little sloppy, but I honestly, was not analyzing this match. So I mean, take my rating with a grain of salt here because I really kind of tuned out in and out of this thing. It was not gripping my attention. So,
Jason, what you got?
And I'll just piggyback on what Two Beer just said and give it the 2 stars that I gave the original match. I just think it is, for me, it kind of devalues what they did with the Ascension, and we'll see that coming on later up here in a little bit. Lucha Dragons aren't supposed to beat the Ascension. I get what you're trying to do, but ultimately it doesn't work. The Vaudevillains were a good tag team, but this doesn't feel like the spot to have them go over. The match itself, like Two Beer said, it was good, but it wasn't anything spectacular. It was a match, but it was for the tag titles, and I guess there's something to be said about that. But I agree with Zach on this one. I didn't necessarily see me really getting into this match by any stretch of imagination. Obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, I've seen this match before, so I kind of knew what was going to happen by the end. The second time around didn't do it any more justice than the first time around, so for me, it's 2 stars.
Yeah, I gave it 1.5 stars. I mean, they're great workers, all of them. I love the Vaudevillains gimmick. It was never really a main event gimmick, but it was never supposed to be a main event gimmick. It was fun. Lucha Dragons can obviously work. I gave it 1.5 stars. I gave no stars to the next one. Baron Corbin, over as fuck with the Full Sail crowd. Who fucking knew, man? Over as fuck. And we'll get into the Roman.
Come a long way.
That's good. I'm sure we'll get into I want to talk about the Roman Reigns promo here in a little bit. We got about 20 minutes left before I have to give up the computer. Baron Corbin versus Ty Dillinger, who, I don't know, still has no charisma. I think Baron Corbin has more charisma than Ty Dillinger. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong.
No, not in this case.
Baron Corbin gets a raw deal because of the way that they present him. Like, I've seen Baron Corbin wrestle live, and I've seen like his presence live, and maybe that's why they push him so hard in this like main event like heel status. Like, Baron Corbin like has a lot going for him. The dude like has charisma, and he knows like how to present himself in a way that he's better than you, like without necessarily being as overt as like MJF, right? Like he's a big guy. He is like an athlete, like a legitimate athlete, but he just gets booked so hard and so bad, and he just gets shoved down our throats. And but you could see early Baron Corbin, even much greener, way more over. People loved watching this guy. And this is a pretty harsh crowd. Like, this is an indie crowd. This is not a very forgiving crowd, right?
Yeah, and the end of days is a badass finisher to people he can do it to. Jason, any thoughts on that before we move on?
I gave it 1 star, and I think this is the reason why we have so many Baron Corbin fans now. Where you're always like, "Why are people Baron Corbin fans? Why are people?" I think this is the genesis of it. These motherfuckers were losing their shit over Baron Corbin, and that kind of reinforced why I don't get it, because it's not for me. But this is probably the reason why there are so many Baron Corbin fans, because like you said, he was over AF.
All right, we got Hideo Itami, a.k.a. Kenta, and Finn Balor, a.k.a. the Boogeyman, versus Ascension. I gave this 2 stars. Finn and Itami were fun together. They didn't Ascension. It was basically a showcase match, which I get, but I mean, nothing to write home about. In fact, I'm going to make it 1.5.
Damn.
I mean, it's not really. It's hardly even like a story was told, man.
No, see.
All right, give us your star. Give us your star.
The vignette going before the match started. Not like it matters. I was about to say I gave it 2.5 stars. I mean, the whole point of it was, Hideo Itami was getting picked on, so he brought in a guy that he knew that was going to have his back in Finn Balor. So, unfortunately, they used the Ascension, who was the longest reigning tag team champions, and now, in the eyes of some, not to me, but in the eyes of some, have lost to 4 guys that are significantly smaller than the Ascension themselves. So, I mean, that's not necessarily a good look. Ultimately, I get where they're going with this. It's supposed to be about Finn Balor and Hideo Itami moving forward, but I mean, that's neither here nor there. The match itself was okay. The double coup de grace was interesting. The full go to sleep was another part where you could tell this was an indie crowd, because when Hideo Itami put, I think it was Connor up on his back, the whole crowd was like, like this was getting ready to happen. And then, of course, they went away from it. But at the end of the day, it was what it was. I mean, it was a match for, like you said, Hideo Itami and Finn Balor to get over.
Zach, what you think?
Yeah, I mean, it was cool to see those guys together, and for, the NXT crowd to see it, and for the announcing team to not be so WWE about it, and to actually point out that these guys, both come from Japan, right? Like, they actually, they mention, that history. So that was pretty neat. But yeah, I gave it 2.5 stars, which is the same rating that I gave that other match, which was not nearly as good as this one, which is not necessarily a great match. So, I should probably amend that other one. But yeah, this was 2.5 also. Even though it had better wrestlers, at least in one half. Ascension, they don't do it for me, man. Like, they're like a worse Road Warriors. And they would not have cut it in modern NXT. I totally get why they were cut. I'm not saying they're bad or anything. Like, they got a real good indie gimmick, but they're not that NXT caliber. Like, they just wouldn't cut it.
All right, before we get to the final two matches, there was a Roman Reigns promo in the middle of this that kind of caught my eye, just because Charlie Caruso, I think it was Charlie Caruso, or no, it was Renee Young. Renee Young pointed out that Roman Reigns had won the fan vote for Slammy for Wrestler of the Year. So this is in that sweet spot. This is in the sweet spot of when the Shield kind of turned face. Roman Reigns eliminated a bunch of dudes from the Royal Rumble, and everybody was in love with Roman Reigns. And this was right before they beat DX at WrestleMania, and they squashed him in 2.5 minutes. This was the only part where everybody was on the same page that Roman Reigns was cool. I just thought that was interesting.
Speak for yourself, homie.
You didn't think that was interesting?
No, it was very interesting. I think that's part of the reason why A, we did it, and B, just always looking back upon retrospect. I mean, this is the Roman Reigns hard push was something I was not a big fan of, and we can go into that at a later point. But for me, when I saw this, a part of me kind of got mad. I ain't even gonna lie.
Hold on, you kind of got mad?
He's heating up.
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay, we had Sasha Banks versus Charlotte Flair. Zach, I'll let you go first. What you think?
This was fine, but I think it was the worst Charlotte-Sasha match I've ever seen. Because they've had some good ones. I don't know, maybe it was because they were younger and greener. It had a pretty cool finish. What's the name of that move that she doesn't use anymore? The neck snapper?
Natural selection.
The natural selection off the top rope was cool. I did not love, I mean, this is only 6 years ago, guys. This is not the 50s. We're not watching 1950s wrestling. The whole time, they have Charlotte versus Sasha, and I know it's Charlotte's gimmick, the whole genetically superior because of her, dad and stuff, and she's, a super athlete. But, when you got, Charlotte, this, Amazonian, white woman against, Sasha Banks, who is very urban, I don't think you should keep saying genetically superior over and over and over. Just really rubbed me the wrong way.
You went there.
I didn't even. That didn't even occur to me, which makes you the racist, Zach.
I mean, I'm not even going that deep.
Do you want to? Do you want to give?
It just rubbed me the wrong way.
That's not where I thought you were going to go. I thought you were going to say
at all.
We were saying the same thing last week in the Bayley versus Charlotte match at Fatal 4-Way NXT TakeOver, where they kept talking about, oh, have you ever seen a female do that? We've never seen a female do that, and it's I mean, like you said, it's only 6 years ago. It's really only 4.5 or 5.5 years ago that we've become so accustomed to how great women's wrestling is that it would be ridiculous to hear an announcer say something like that today, that we've never seen a female move like that. It's so stupid. I thought this match, we've seen a lot of, Charlotte and Sasha have fought a lot. I still gave this match 3.75. I thought it was really good. Jason.
I gave it 3 stars. For me, the build was better than the actual match itself, and that to me is a part of the whole scenario. It's kind of like we made the analogy a few weeks ago when we all saw each other. It's like flying a plane. You can take off and you can fly it, that's great, but if you can't land that plane and get the passenger safe, then what's the point? There will be, obviously missteps, but I agree with Tubier on this one. I think that's partially the fact of them just being green, and for Sasha especially, this is probably her biggest moment. Charlotte hadn't been the champ that long either, so I mean, every match was probably bigger than the next. So probably not the best Charlotte-Sasha match we're going to see, but it wasn't the worst by any stretch.
What's your star rating, Zach?
I give it 3 1/4.
Okay, let's move on to Adrian Neville versus Sami Zayn. Career versus belt match. Lasted about 23 minutes. Jason, I'll let you go first.
Second time I saw this match, the second time that I was really emotionally stirred by the end, because I hate when people say that you can't tell a story in ring. This was literally a story in the ring. They built it up where Sami can't win the big one, and then when there was a time where he could have cheated to win, he chose the right path, and then it looked like he was going to get pinned, to where now, like, oh shit, Sami just fucked up, and cost himself the career. He turns around and makes this a big win. That on top of the fact that, you have the KO turn on him at the end. This, as it stands right now, is the best takeover match that we have seen to this point. It was an absolute amazing fucking ride. I gave it 4.5 stars.
I gave last week's Fatal 4-Way match between Breeze and... Sorry. You guys know who I'm talking about. Who the fuck was in that match? Breeze versus Sami Zayn versus Tyler Kidd and Neville. I gave that 4 stars. I gave this 4 1/4. And the reason I gave it 4 1/4, there's a couple things I didn't really like about the match. I'm not the biggest fan of ref bumps. If you want to do 1 ref bump, I'm totally cool with it. They did 2 ref bumps. It just seems kind of cheap. And this is really nitpicky because this is obviously a fantastic match. But there were 2 ref bumps, so I docked it for that a little bit. For Neville to kick Sami's hand away, I don't know if you count this towards the match, but to kick his hand away at the end and give him a hug instead, after a couple low blows and purposefully bumping the ref, seems a little consistent. I give it 4 1/4 stars. Fucking Zach was 100,000% right, though, when he said earlier in this podcast that Sami Zayn could be the biggest babyface in the world if they would just ride him and let him be Sami Zayn, because this is Sami Zayn at his purest, in front of an...
This is Daniel Bryan if you wanted to do it in a certain kind of way. Even if you didn't want to do it a certain kind of way, you have a pure baby face on your hands. Go ahead.
Yep. Zach, what's your star rating on this?
Yeah, super solid match. I actually gave it 4.5. I debated giving it 4 3/4, but I thought it was wildly good, very entertaining. It was a fantastic build, an amazing payoff. But I didn't want to encapsulate all of that necessarily into the match, and maybe if I had actually watched that, because it seems different to us because we just watched this in a couple weeks, but apparently Neville had held that title for 300 days or something.
Yeah,
and that's to me is a part of the build to this match, because it's the class. To me, this is a rub. Okay, you have a champion that is a long-term champion that is knocked down in whatever form or fashion, fair or unfair. Everybody that you put in front of him and now here's the one guy that he can't beat, and now all the chips are in the middle, career versus title. The guy that's put the career on the line goes over, so he gets the rub for beating the guy that's been holding the title for 300 some odd days. I know it's kind of a weird scenario because it's all about sports entertainment from time to time, but once again, you can tell a story inside the ring.
Yeah, and I think if I would have been watching all those 300 days, I probably would have been more invested in the match, and it probably would have bumped my star rating up a little bit. Instead, I'm kind of watching it in a vacuum, despite the vignette. Like, I can appreciate it, but yeah, I would 4.5, super solid, great match.
Never forget that after Neville lost the title, he went up to the main roster, and Vince wanted to give him a Mighty Mouse routine or a Mighty Mouse gimmick. Because his ears were big, Vince wanted to make him Mighty Mouse.
They made that man wear a cape, dog.
Can we say that this is the best one that we've seen thus far?
Yeah,
Yes.
easily.
Yeah, without question. I was going to say the last two matches, whether star ratings or not, I think pushes it over the top. I agree with, I think it was Bill that said this had an NXT TV show to it. It's not the takeovers that we know and love. I keep cheating to see what's getting ready to come up. I think the takeovers that we know and love are getting ready to start coming up here in just a second.
Yeah, we're going to have to devote some more time to them, so hopefully WWE continues to suck. Hey, I know we didn't talk about AEW this week, but I promise all you beefers we will talk about it next week.
This is banned from ringside.
Okay, we got some birthdays. Dr. Death Steve Williams is 60 this week. I don't know if he's still alive. Vader, R.I.P., would have been 65. Zack Ryder is 35. Kevin Von Erich would have been 63. Farouk.
Kevin Von Erich is alive.
And he is 63.
Jesus Christ.
Dude, I can't remember what you. That's why I got.
That's an understandable. Like, that one's understandable.
Yeah, thank you, Zach. Yeah, I fucked up before. I have fucked up before. That's not a fuck up.
It's the Von Erichs.
Farouk is 62. The Good Father, you guys might know him as the Godfather, but the Good Father from Right to Censor is 59. Mike Kanellis is 35. Earl and Dave Hebner, without a doubt, in my mind, for my money, the best pair of identical twins that have ever both become professional wrestling referees are 71 this week. Alex Wright is 45. Dash Wilder is only 33. Jimmy the Murder Fly Snuka is 77. Andre the Giant would have been 74. Aleister Black is 35. Kip Sabian, 28. Road Dogg Jesse James is 51. And Occam, you guys remember Authors of Pain? Occam is 27. Hey, everybody. We know there's lots of podcasts to listen to, so we appreciate you guys listening to ours. For F&B Eatery, for Vice, for Lucha Chris, for Two Beard Zach Pullman, for Jason Cornelius Bell. I am Bill Vagey, and everybody boo the heel.
We going to hell, everybody. We're going to see Jimmy Super.
I think we'll be all right. Peace.